916-339-1140. But right now, it is a man that's been very gracious and kind to me over the years with his time. You know him. You see him on TV. Jorge Sedano on Twitter, @Sedano. Obviously, you see him on PTI. He also does a wonderful job on the sidelines for covering the NBA games. And it says here, I'm looking at your profile, George. It says, I once got Pop to smile during a sideline interview. Do you remember what you said to get him to smile? Because that is a difficult task.
Yeah, I asked him a question. It was and thanks for having me on. DeMar DeRozan's return game. So this is a number of years ago now. And I asked him, the first question was, hey, DeMar's return game, end of the first quarter, a lot of emotions. How do you think he's fared? And he said, in very Pop-like fashion, I think he's fared well. And I looked at him and I said, okay, how about we just end on that one? I come out ahead here. And then he looked at me and then he smiled and he said, I was really looking forward to a second question. And I said, all right, well, Derek White's back in the lineup. He's been out due to injury. How do you think he's done? And he's like, he's done well. And I was like, all right, cool, thanks. And he's like, this was fun. And I'm like, yeah, we should do it again sometime. And he slapped me on the rear end and walked away.
That's awesome. Yeah. Is that me?
I don't know.
Can't be me.
Oh, no. There we go.
All right.
I got it.
Sorry about that. Yeah, no, I'm looking on your, if you go to @Sedano, he's pinned the video at the top of his feed, so check it out. That's good stuff. George, when it comes to NBA free agency, what, I guess, has surprised you, though? I mean, tons of money getting thrown around. The James Harden thing is crazy. Lillard has finally asked for a trade, but what stood out to you the most in NBA free agency so far?
The Houston Rockets spending all that money. Now, I get the Fred VanVleet situation. You're talking about a champion, a guy who is ready to take that next step in his career to be the leader. I think he was one of those guys in Toronto. They have a very young team, so you want one of those guys who's established. The Dylan Brooks number to me was the one that stood out because it's $80 million over 4 years. I didn't think he had that marketplace, to be honest with you. So I was surprised that move was made. The other stuff they did, like Jeff Green, that makes sense. Again, another vet. And I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to bring in some veteran guys to help those young guys maybe get into the play-in situation, give them some experience early on, and go from there. I just didn't understand the Dylan Brooks signing because I just don't know who else was bidding against them in that scenario.
I know you're based in Miami, George. Are folks already getting their Dame Lillard jerseys or Dame Lillard Heat jerseys down there? How much of a sure thing do you feel like, and do folks down in Miami feel like this is happening?
Well, I haven't lived in Miami in about a decade, but I live in LA, and but I'm obviously still very close to the organization and a lot of people there. And yeah, I think this is what they do, and we'll see if it works out. But you look at them historically, Pat Riley swings big, and it usually ends up in championships. So I'm curious to see if this gets done. If I had to guess, it gets done. It's probably going to get messy, but it'll eventually get done.
Jorge Sedano joins us. Romney and Zachariah, Sactown Sports, 1140 a.m. George, what did you make of what me and Romney were going back and forth about what the Kings did, which essentially I like to sum up as 2 re-signings of guys that they already had and then 2 additions. But the team that you saw with a Game 7 at home that obviously they lost to the Warriors, a very young team that should only get better. Are you okay with them essentially standing pat, adding a couple of pieces? What did you make of what the Kings did in the offseason?
Just don't know what else there was for them to do. You know what I mean? I feel like it's always easy to say, oh, they should have done more. And it's like, okay, well, then what should they have done? Because I don't see a scenario where there was something that was obvious for them to do. Maybe I'm missing something. But I like their team. They pushed one of the best teams in the sport to a 7th game, a team that had a ton of experience and won 4 titles. And just kind of like what we were talking about with Houston, now I think Sacramento clearly is way ahead of them, as we saw last season, as they were a top 2 or 3 seed. So, but they got that experience, and I think that experience will only help them. So I'm okay with that. And I really think that Mike Brown deserves a ton of credit for what he did, not only with that team in the regular season, but we saw that team kind of take a different step defensively, right? And kind of turn it up a notch defensively that we had not seen during the regular season. And that, to me, is something that I am looking forward to seeing if they can replicate more in the regular season. Now, I know the intensity is never going to be the same in the regular season as in the postseason, but I'd like to see them build more of those habits, because that was the thing that I thought distinguished the two teams was, well, going into the series, I was like, well, I just don't know if Sacramento's defense can hold up. And then you saw them play defense the way they did in that series, and I was pleasantly surprised. So I'd like to see them build those habits in the regular season to see if they can take that defense even to a higher level in the upcoming postseason.
Now that a lot of the free agent dust has settled, at least the major pieces, what do you think their ceiling is in this coming? I was telling Zachariah, I like what they're building and the fact that there is some stability, and 2-3 years down the road with the development of Keegan Murray and Vezenkov, the EuroLeague MVP who they brought up, this could be a really good team 2-3 years down the road. I just don't feel, George, like they really helped their chances in this coming season or raise their ceiling for how far they could go in this coming season.
Well, I just think the league is tough. I mean, we've never seen the league in the years I've been covering it, and it's going back 20 now, where there's this much parity, where a move here or there can change your fortunes. Now, I don't know very much about the European import, but the people I talk to that know way more about basketball over there than I do really like the move. So I think that, to your point, I think they're building something. And can they be a thorn in people's side this year? Absolutely. Again, to me, it's about building those habits, taking that next step. You got a taste of the playoffs last year for the first time in many, many years, as we all know. And now, can you build upon that, or are you going to rest on your laurels? That, to me, is less so on Mike Brown and more so on the players in the locker room. Are they satisfied with what they accomplished last year, or are they willing to put in the work to get even better? And if they're willing to get better, then why can't they be in the mix in a tough Western Conference?
He is Jorge Sedano. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you and Scoop Jackson, George, two of the nicest guys in this business. Always get back to me. Always help me out when I need you. I really appreciate it. On Twitter, @Sedano. You see him on TV, you hear him on radio, but most importantly, he got Greg Popovich to smile. That is no small feat. Thank you so much for your time, George.
I'll make sure it's also on my tombstone, not just my pin tweet.
You know how funny that would actually be if you did that, George? If some random person was just walking by, it'd have to be a sports fan, but they would get it. You should do that. Somebody would get a huge kick out of that. Loving father and husband, and made Popovich laugh.
I'll make sure my wife knows my final wishes. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, George. See you.